Hey, everybody. I'm here with two of my diamond dogs, Chris and Mike. And this recording might be the beginning of a new series of conversations that we host here. And the reason that this conversation is taking place is because I believe men don't have enough access to resources, to mentors, to models, to examples, and to community that helps them be the type of men they want to be and the type of husbands they want to be. And these two guys belong to a men's group that I'm a part of online. And it's a men's group that is focused on calling each other out on our bullcrap and helping each other become better men and better husbands. And the conversations that happen between us are real and they're vulnerable and they're authentic. And they're the type of things that I think a lot of men are out there craving. So this is an opportunity to bring that experience to you. And I think today's conversation is going to be focused on some really basic tenets of our men's group, some of the basic principles. And we're going to address some of the main concerns that have caused us a lot of pain and frustration in our own relationships. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we've recognized those things and how we've dealt with them, and we're still dealing with them. And I hope it's helpful. And if it is, please let me know because we're willing to do more of these conversations. This is totally an experiment. And I hope it's well received. So, guys, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure. I want to talk today about nice guy syndrome. If you, let's start with Mike. If you could describe what it is to be a nice guy in the context of this conversation today, what would be your definition of that?
A nice guy. Often when I talk to guys and I start to sense some of that nice guyness, the way I often try and describe it is a guy who does things to get something out of somebody else. So it's like giving in order to get. I think in the book, and maybe it's obvious, but a lot of these concepts come from the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. Great book. But he talks about how nice guys are inherently dishonest and manipulative. It's a very much a give to get, kind of a quid pro quo relationship with people. So that's kind of the essence of a nice guy to me.
I like that. I think it's worth mentioning too that those negative characteristics are often hidden under this really glossy, polished veneer of somebody who is well liked and who has a great reputation. Like they've strived really hard to find acceptance in the community that they participate in. So from the outside, they look like really great, reputable people. But when you get underneath that surface, you find that there's a lot of emotional turmoil, a lot of conflict, a lot of, like you said, manipulation, and it can get really ugly. Chris, do you want to add to that definition at all?
Yeah. Well, I would add that the reasoning for the dishonesty is there's an inherent belief that their needs don't matter, right? And they've been programmed or wired by a lot of external influences to believe that the way to get their needs met is through kind of manipulative, passive aggressive tactics. And we can talk a little bit about, some of those external influences.
Let's do that right now.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have something at the top of your mind, I would love to hear. Let's get specific. Specifics are fun.
Sure. So, there's a lot of nice guys who grew up in a conservative, religious family and culture and, received a lot of external messaging around the inherent dangers of their sexuality, which led them to believe that it was something to be afraid of. Also kind of the framing around, if you commit sin, you're an evil, bad person. And, if you choose the right and just do what's, you're obedient, then your life is going to be smooth. And everything is going to go your way and you're not going to have any problems. So that's one, I think in the media, there's just very few examples of what modern healthy masculinity looks like how to not be a nice guy, how to like in a healthy way voice your desires and your needs and get them met. A lot of people grow up in families, a lot of nice guys grow up in families where they have a father who just was never approving of them, or maybe they had a mother that relied on them for her identity. So they've just been conditioned to put others' needs and desires ahead of their own. In the book, Glover talks about school systems and workplaces. And so there's just a lot of like external influences that create a lot of internal programming inside of nice guys to be dishonest.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you there. I think there's going to be some real value in sharing at your own comfort level, our own personal stories with being a nice guy. And I'm happy to lead if you want. But I know in my experience, one of the things I was taught growing up is exactly what you just said, Chris. It was that a good man is somebody who prioritizes the needs and wants of other people before their own. And so I grew up believing that it was my job to be needless and wantless and to just be kind of this fulfiller of everybody else's needs. And that if I did that, people would like me. And so I never had an opinion, simple things. I never had an opinion on where we were going to eat dinner for date night. I never had an opinion on what kind of car we needed to get, or, how we're going to decorate the house, or how we're going to do things on vacation. It was really easy for me to just defer to my partner always and let them be the decision maker. And then over time, because I wasn't getting what I needed and what I wanted, I'd become resentful and passive aggressive. And rather than asking for what I wanted, I would withdraw affection, or I would subtly punish my partner for not just innately knowing what my needs and wants were. And I'm not saying like physically punish, but through subtle things like making a snippy comment, or being overly irritable, or taking things more personally than I needed to, or once again, like withdrawing physical affection or emotional affection. There were these subtle punishments that I would make when she wasn't giving me what I wanted, because I didn't, and I didn't feel safe or like it was appropriate or okay for me to ask for what I wanted. So I had all these, Dr. Glover calls them covert contracts, these hidden agreements that I had made. If I do X, Y, and Z, then my wife will see that and do X, Y, and Z for me. And she wasn't privy to those contracts. She didn't know what was going on in my brain, but I was kind of expecting things to happen a certain way. Like if I do dishes, she's going to be grateful and be super happy and give me verbal praise. She's going to fill me up with my love language, which is words of affirmation. Or if I clean the whole house while she's at work and she comes home to a clean house and dinner, then maybe I'll be rewarded with sex. Or a Facebook post talking about how great I am as a person. And it sounds a little pitiful to share that, but that's the world I lived in, is that I earned acceptance through doing things the right way and by sacrificing my own needs, wants, and desires, and then tried to get fulfillment through manipulation.
Yeah, it's scary to ask for what we want sometimes. And so there's kind of this safety in, I won't ask for what I want. I'll just be nice and then expect to get what I want. And then when I don't get what I want, I'll just stew and be resentful and bitter because they didn't hold up their end of the contract that they don't even know exists. Right.
Yeah. Mike, do you have a nice guy moment from your past that you'd be willing to share? Like something that exemplifies you embodying that nice guy persona?
I mean, just in a general sense, a few years ago when I realized our marriage was not what I wanted it to be, and I started trying to push for something better. I mean, looking back now, I can see how my world revolved around my wife. Like she was the center of my universe. She was my everything. She was my all. I didn't have really good male friendships. I didn't have any real hobbies, passions, interests. You know, I worked hard at my in my career, and then came home, and it was just my wife and the kids. But mostly the wife. I wanted her to um, fill my bucket, and it put a lot of pressure on her to be my everything. And I thought I was like the dream husband, right? Like I used to tell myself these stories like, man, there are women out there who would just kill themselves to have a chance with a guy as great as me, as nice as me, who's so committed, who's so devoted, just, got her up on this pedestal and just this adoring husband. And she doesn't appreciate it. She doesn't see how good she's got it. And I mean, yeah, there were a lot of times where I was like looking around thinking, oh, I bet she'd appreciate me. Oh, I bet she'd appreciate me. Like total nice guy mentality that what I thought I thought I was doing the right thing by kind of losing myself and letting my life revolve around her. But yeah, in hindsight now, I can see how really unattractive and undesirable I was. I was just very needy, very taking, very smothering, because I didn't have, I wasn't like my own person. I was very enmeshed with her and just codependent on her. I mean, that's not a specific example, but just in a general sense, that's how my nice guy looked not too long ago.
And what did some of that neediness and smotheriness look like?
Oh, I wanted to just do everything with her. I would get really anxious when, if she had like a girls' night out or something. I would sit home and just drowning in anxiety. Um, what's she doing? Who's she talking to? What are they talking about? Is she having fun without me? Um, I would like check the location on her phone to see if she had left the house yet and if she was on her way home. And I mean, I was just really, really anxious. I couldn't stand being apart from her and couldn't wait until we were reunited. So I felt secure and loved and whole again, right?
So interesting. And tell me, because I think that type of attachment or connection is sometimes idealized. Like we talk about becoming one as a couple, you talk about, you want to be with somebody you can't live without. And so what about that was attractive? Because I can see people from the outside maybe looking at that and saying, that sounds kind of nice to have somebody love me that much that they're really, they care about where I'm at and what, if I'm safe and they want to spend all that time with me. So other people might be thinking, holy crap, that's super not good. But can you de-romanticize that for me and tell me what about that made you unattractive to your wife?
Yeah. Um, boy, it is. It's true. It's so romanticized. Like I thought of Jerry Maguire, right? Like you complete me.
Yeah.
Without you, I am nothing. And I don't think that's ultimately the kind of person we want to be with. Somebody who is nothing without us. I think, we're innately attracted to people who are um, confident and secure in themselves, who are a whole person on their own, and then with strength can choose to bring that whole person to a relationship.
Mm.
And I mean, I was just kind of like a shell of a person. Um, that yeah, I'm sure she appreciated to some extent the validation I gave her, the attention, the adoration. Um, but yeah, it wasn't attractive. It wasn't desirable. It wasn't helping our sex life. Um, it was doing the opposite. Actually, it was
Mm.
kind of driving a wedge in between us.
So interesting. Chris, kick it over to you. You've had a smile on your face the last couple minutes. What's going through your mind?
Oh, everything you guys were saying is like my lived experience. It's incredible the similarities that we have, in the thought patterns that we share. My personal experience. I mean, I grew up in a family of 5 boys, and my parents were great parents. But what was celebrated in my family was cool and flexible, like not having any needs, not being a disruption, just going along with the flow. And that created some conditioning in me, along with what you were saying earlier, Nate, some of the teachings in the church that I think in my head I just took a little too far. Like, we must become one, or we become one flesh. And without you, I can't, achieve my eternal exaltation. And so it's like anything that was falling short of that ideal or that goal made me feel like a failure, and made me feel like I wasn't living up to, you know, God's potential. And man, I it just created a lot of frustration. And because I was frustrated, I withdrew, a lot of resentment, and the covert contracts like were everywhere. Um, it was really painful to come to this realization.
Mm, that sounds really painful. Yeah. And so talk to me. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that nice guys do to get what they want. We've talked a little bit about covert contracts, but I'd be curious to hear um, if this is obviously not a great place to be. It hurts your relationship. It and the hard. I think the tricky thing about it is that nice guys feel like they're in a one up position. Nice guys feel like they're in the right. Like the thing that they're doing that is damaging their relationship, at least for me, it was like, well, I'm in the right here. I'm doing something good. I'm sacrificing. I'm putting my needs aside. Like we kind of idealize this way of being that's very destructive. And so it can be hard to flip that switch and realize, oh, this thing that I've been taught or that I believe is actually really right and good and that it's uplifting and nurturing is actually causing a lot of pain and harm. I think it's important to really shine a light on what those behaviors are so that we really get a full spectrum, a full picture of what a nice guy is actually capable of and what strategies we have employed in the past that have we thought were good. I think genuinely a lot of nice guys believe I'm in the right. Like I'm in the good. I'm on the right side of this situation. And come to find out, when the goggles come off, it or the light switch turns on, you're like, oh, wow, how wrong was I? I know for me personally, one of the things that I still struggle with to this day is caretaking. And that's a very nice guy thing. And caretaking is different than taking care of somebody. Caretaking is taking care of somebody with an agenda. You take care of somebody because it makes you look good, not because you actually care about the person. There's some sort of something in it for you, uh, whether it's like a good feeling or you're gaining status or you're getting something out of it. What are some other I kind of things that separate caretaking from being actually taking care of somebody? Can you guys think of anything off the top of your head?
It just feels like
Go ahead.
like doing the right thing for the right reason, which is kind of what you're saying, but caring for somebody for their good and meeting their needs, not as a way to then extract something out of them, but yeah, just doing the right thing for the right reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned a few of them earlier, in our own personal stories. Like putting our needs, kind of separating our needs, voicing them in an honest way. A lot of passive aggressiveness, um, a lot of fixing, thinking like, if I can come fix this problem for you, then everything's going to work out. I'm going to have a smooth life. Um, yeah, hard to
No,
think
you're
of
good. I just pulled up a little I pulled up a document that I wrote a while back that shows the difference between caring for somebody and caretaking. So caretaking often stems from feelings of shame or guilt or the need for external validation. So you're doing something for somebody because you feel guilty, you feel ashamed, you feel like you owe them something. It's your duty. The giver often gives only what they need to give to feel good about themselves, to look good, and not necessarily what the receiver needs. Caretaking comes from a place of emptiness within the giver. It has some sort of unconscious strings attached to it, and it's often used as a way to avoid conflict. Whereas caring for somebody focuses on giving to the other what that other person really needs, what the receiver needs. It comes from a place of abundance within the giver with no strings attached, and it stems from feelings of compassion and goodwill, not obligation, guilt, or shame. So I think those can be a good litmus test of, am I giving as a nice guy, or am I giving as like a good person from a place of goodness? And if there's strings attached, if it's coming from a place of emptiness and shame, if you're giving somebody something that you want to give them and not something that they actually need, those are good red flags of that there's some strings attached there.
Yeah. And I just pulled up some of my notes to round out this discussion. I think we've already hit on the big things, but a couple of others that Glover points out in his book is often nice guys are full of rage. And I think it's a lot of like the resentment just building up over time. They have addictions. They have difficulty setting boundaries. They have really hard time saying no. It makes them extremely uncomfortable. Frequently isolated, attracted to people and situations that need fixing, have problems in intimate relationships, and they're relatively successful, probably because, they do what's right. They try to follow, norms.
Yeah. Man, once you hear that list, that blows up the conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like I just think about my past and I'm like, check, 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 check.
Yep.
Yeah. The first time I read this book, it was really hard. I wanted to throw it against the wall. I had to go really slow. Fortunately, another member of the group, Diamond Dogs, said, you really should do the audiobook first. Because when it's on audio, it's harder stopping and you can just kind of let somebody talk to you and then go back and read the book. And for everybody listening, just know this is a book that took 6 years to write. Originally, I think the original manuscript was 500 pages long, and he knew it was just way too long. Nobody was going to read it. So he cut it down to, I think, like 150, 200 pages. And every chapter is like a golden nugget of wisdom. I
Nugget makes the slap in the face, it feels like.
Yeah, a painful, but like, it's a really good slap in the face. And it's hard to read because you feel like this guy, you've never met before, knows you better than you know yourself.
So what of that list of things that you just read off was the most painful for you to realize in yourself?
Ooh, dishonest, I think.
Where did that come from in you? Because I know that as a person, that dishonesty goes against your values. So when you realized I'm being dishonest, like where did that come from in you?
I thought it was a path of less pain, like it was like a sense of being afraid to be abandoned or rejected. And we talk about this in the book that like, just fear of being rejected, and it's hard because when we open up and express what our desires are, and our partner's like, no, we feel unworthy. We feel like the world is not an abundant place. It's a scary, mean, evil place.
Hmm.
And, um, I think Glover talks a lot about this in the book, that underlying a lot of dishonesty is just fear. And that was true for me. Very true.
How did you justify it? Your dishonesty. By the way, we've all been dishonest, so this is not like just
Right.
a you thing. This is
No, yeah.
I think your personal experience will reflect ours. I'm just asking you to be the voice here.
I justified it by, thinking that if I were 100% truthful and honest, it would cause more pain and create a lot of destruction.
So you're
That,
protecting everybody else.
yeah,
Life is easier, and they can be protected if
yeah,
they just
exactly. Yeah.
But
But
underneath that was, I don't want to be rejected.
I'm afraid of fear and abandonment. I'm afraid of being abandoned. I'm afraid of rejection. I don't like rejection, nor do I like confrontation. The confrontation just creates a well of anxiety inside of me that I just try to get out of as fast as possible.
Yes, I
It's
definitely resonate with that.
it's hard too because you don't really see it as, or at least I didn't. I didn't see it as dishonesty. Like I thought I was being nice. I thought I was being kind by, avoiding hard truths or suppressing my needs or my wants. I didn't see it as dishonesty, and so that was one of those slaps in the face. Was, oh, I am a liar. Like all these things are just the manipulation for me. Like that was probably my biggest pain point, was just seeing how I, just day in and day out, I was subtly trying to manipulate my wife to give me what I wanted. Okay, if I say this, there's a good chance she won't do what I want. So maybe I'll say this instead. If I say the truth, that may backfire. So if I kind of approach it in this way or that way and do this and don't do that, I might get what I want.
Yeah.
Very, very manipulative.
And for me, I think one of the hardest realizations about this is that oftentimes what I wanted was just to be seen as, I wanted to protect my image. I wanted to be right. I wanted to be the good one. I wanted to maintain the nice guy persona. Like I didn't want to crack in my veneer. I didn't want to mar on my record. And so I would either avoid saying and doing things or deliberately say and do things that would make other people look bad so that I could protect my own self-image, so that I could protect my own psychological and emotional safety. And I got really good. Like it's scary the circus tricks I was able to perform in my brain to justify some of the evasion and manipulation tactics to just avoid being honest about something as simple as what I want. Like sitting down and saying, I want to go watch this movie tonight. Um, and the fear that my wife would be like, I don't want to watch that movie. And then I'm like, or, that's a little too violent, or maybe it's got too much graphic language in it. And then me being like, oh, what does that say about me as a person now that I like things that are too violent or too this or that? And so it's just easier to not vocalize a preference and not risk marring your reputation, and then let her be the one who suggests it and then go, haha, yes. Now I have the moral high ground. I didn't have to be the one who chose the thing that had where there was potential risk. It's crazy. Down to something so simple.
Yeah. I was just thinking too, I mean, these things often aren't created in a vacuum. There's a lot of relational dynamics that go into these problems that we have. And
Yeah.
I mean, for me, my wife, she has suffered from really high anxiety throughout her life. And, I kind of learned to kind of fold into her anxiety to keep her comfortable, to keep her anxiety at bay. And so it was often just easier to say, I don't care what we watch. I don't care where we eat. Whatever you want, dear. It was just kind of that attitude in the relationship that it just helped avoid conflict. It helped keep my anxiety at bay because it kept her anxiety at bay. And so, yeah, I, I was a total nice guy, but it makes more sense when I kind of look at the relationship as a whole and
Yeah.
how we kind of played off of each other in creating my nice guy persona.
Yeah. I love that. I find anxiety to be a very underlying key driver of nice guy syndrome. Anxiety, whether it's anxiety because of through your relationship with God or through your relationship with your partner or through your relationship with your parents, it's a lot of not wanting to disappoint and the need to it's almost like a male version of perfectionism. If I don't take risks and I don't be vulnerable and I don't express my needs, wants, and desires, then nobody can see my flaws. I can't fail if I don't take risks. And if I can subversively get my needs met um, by doing things quote unquote right, then it's just technically a reward for my good deeds. And anyway, I that that quote from David Schnarch of when you can't control yourself, you attempt to control everybody around you, the behaviors of everybody around you. That is very evident, I think, in nice guy syndrome. Is you can't when just like you said, your wife's anxiety may have been contagious as emotions are, and made you feel uncomfortable and anxious. You didn't know how to deal with it, and so your way of dealing with it was to instead of address the underlying issue, I'm anxious. How do I get my wife's anxiety to go away? Well, that's great. Be a perfect husband.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a David Schnarch idea as well that, when we think we're managing the anxiety of others, we're actually just managing our own anxiety. But we just don't see it that way. We try and control others in order to keep ourselves comfortable and keep our own anxiety at bay.
I think that's the reason why too. Nice guys are great analytical thinkers. I mean, I just constantly get stuck in analytical paralysis, measuring the risks, versus the rewards, and have felt so often in my life that I just get stuck and don't take action because I'm analyzing a situation. And I do it for my work. I do it, in almost all contexts of life. And unfortunately, in intimate relationships, it it doesn't get you anywhere, and and yeah, it takes courage to get out of that.
So, what did it look for the two of you to wake up and start working your way out of the nice guy syndrome?
For me, if it's critical mass, I mean, what I mean by that is the term we throw around, but that Schnarch uses as well. It's just like the pain in my life of being a nice guy threw me into a situation that, you know, I just had to change. Like, if something, like I said, when I reading the book, it was like so painful to read the book, but the pain of not reading it and doing something about it was greater. And I think that a lot of men on this journey who suffer from nice guy syndrome do wait till that kind of last minute where they hit a wall or they hit a low point and they finally say, okay, I gotta get over the stigma I have uh, around personal development, and do something in order to save my relationship or, you know, get unstuck. Um, So that was it for me.
I mean, the process, how this all started, I've got another group of men that I opened up with, and we got vulnerable and started sharing pre Diamond Dogs. And we did a book club. We read the book together, and then we got together and discussed it. We did, I think he calls them breaking free exercises. Is that what he calls them in the book? Um, those were really helpful to actually force yourself to sit down and do those exercises. I think a lot of guys probably want to just listen through it and get to the end and think, okay, all my problems are solved. I listened to the book. I'm no longer a nice guy. But I don't think it works that way. I think you really have to put in the effort and do the work. And it was helpful for me to have that group of guys holding me accountable to some extent and doing the work together. That was really helpful.
Was there a breaking free exercise that you did that you remember being particularly impactful?
I can remember in some of our book clubs as we would discuss our answers to the breaking free, like again, seeing how similar we all were was so helpful. Like, oh man, we are all in the same boat and we didn't even know it. It's like looking in a mirror here as you tell me, the answers and your struggles. And so, but yeah, just the unity, the camaraderie, I guess, of doing that together is what sticks out in my mind.
One of the first breaking free exercises is finding a group of men
Yeah.
that you can talk to. And Mike, you just like, that's exactly what you were already doing.
Yeah.
For me, like, fortunately, I'd already taken, the Jennifer Fitness and Vice course and got invited to this Facebook group, and then, talked to a couple of the guys in that group and was now I'm part of the Diamond Dogs, which the Diamond Dog group alone has been so powerful. It's like an honor to be part of the group because it's led to so many other things that help me break free of nice guy syndrome. For example, Mike um, puts on or supports this men's retreat that happens 2 or 3 times a year. Shout out, where's Heart? And I went to that, and it was so impactful just to go to that, be around other men who are in the arena doing the work, who care, who can, validate my masculinity and say, what you're going through is absolute, like, totally normal. And it's something I've gone through myself, and it's okay. You're going to get through this.
Yeah, one of the things that you read off that is a symptom of a nice guy is they're isolated.
Yeah.
They're isolated, especially from other men. So,
Mhm.
and I think that can reflect in different ways. I think sometimes an isolated man has no friends, but I think oftentimes the way it manifests itself is you do have collegial friends, you have acquaintances, you have people that you can talk to about sport.
Superficial. Yeah.
Yeah, you can talk about sports, you can talk about the neighborhood gossip, you can talk about superficial work stuff, but you can't open up and talk about, hey, I haven't had sex with my wife in 6 months and I don't know what to do. Or we had a blow up fight 2 weeks ago and she's not talking to me and I don't know if this is the end of our relationship or not. Or, and my dad never hugged me and I don't know how to express affection or my feelings. And it's really causing problems in my relationship. These are things that people struggle with and they're carrying it around and they don't have anybody to share with. So Mike, you lead men's groups, like you host, help facilitate some of these retreats. Can you share from your experience why it's so important for men to be able to open up and have genuine relationships and be able to talk about this stuff with other men? Why is that important? And also, just to throw a side question, why can't they just do this work with their wife or women?
Good questions. Yeah, I think there's just something about masculinity that bestows masculinity. And I mean, talks about it in the book, how, life has evolved over the past 50, 100 years, where instead of men bestowing masculinity to their sons, it's become more of a kind of a feminine driven um, way to raise men where, boys are raised by their mothers and then they go to school and their teachers are female, and probably just an absence of good male role models. And then the male role models we have aren't always that great. I mean, I know my dad, he was cold and distant. Um, I can count on one hand how many times he's told me he loves me in my life. Um, I didn't have that gift of seeing what a real man looked like. To me, a real man just kept his head down and worked hard and didn't show emotion and was isolated. And so to get together with other men and start to open up and to share our fears, our concerns, our worries, I mean, it never ceases to surprise me that everyone just says, "Oh, wow, your story is my story." Like that just happens over and over and over again. Like there's so many similarities in how we're feeling on the inside, but we don't talk about it and we don't express it. So there's just something about that brotherhood that it's like our souls are just calling out for, just craving. And our society doesn't do a good job of kind of normalizing that or kind of making it safe to do, like,
Yeah.
um, so these men's groups where we were just able to start opening up and getting real and getting vulnerable just have been life-changing for me and so many other guys I know.
And why can't men just do that with their wives? Like if the vulnerability and opening up thing is what's so healing, why can't I just open up to my wife and be vulnerable with her and get the same result? Because I honestly don't believe you can get the same result in most cases.
Yeah. Um, that's a that's a tricky question to answer. I can share what I think is what's true for me is um wives often, nice guys have created a lot of damage in their relationships because of the dishonesty. And wives don't know, like, they're not in a place to listen, and often don't want to play role of being a therapist for their husbands. They're trying to work on themselves. And um there's often too, like, there's just a lot of like there's a gender gap between the man and the woman that can create a lot of, I think, difficulty to with what they're going through. Um, and so it's not that like a man can't open up to his wife about this. It's just usually not the place because wives just because of destruction, like I said, destruction, and they're just not it's just not you don't want to go to your wife to
Yeah.
validate your masculinity, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a good point just at the very end. Like if your wife is the one validating your masculinity, then you're putting her in a really uncomfortable position to be, once again, it's almost like you're creating that same dynamic of you need her to give you the validation. You need her to give you the approval. She needs to act as kind of like the um,
The gatekeeper, whether you feel good.
gatekeeper was the word I was looking for. Yes.
And they don't want to be on that pedestal. I don't honestly believe that. And in my own personal experience, after living with a nice guy for many years, it's really easy to snip out. Like you can just immediately know whether at least I think women are really good at sniffing that out in men.
Yeah.
And so it's better to start alone and in a men's group.
What do you say to men who are listening to us talk about a men's group and their immediate reaction is to tense up, to be like, there's no way I could do that. Like, that sounds really silly, or it sounds woo woo, or it sounds gay, or whatever label they want to put on it. What do you say to that man who's listening right now going, there's no way I could sit in a room full of other men or on a Zoom call full of other men and open up and share my feelings? What?
I can relate to those feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, what would you say? I'd just say try something different. If what you're doing is not working, try something different. There's a lot of men who can kind of witness to the power of finding good men to associate with. It really is life changing for so many people.
Chris, would
Yeah.
you read through? Would you
Sure.
yeah, go ahead and answer, and then I'll ask you this other question.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, stop trying to be a hero. You don't have to be like, we think we've glorified this idea that we have to figure out our lives on our own as men, and not be vulnerable and not have emotions and feelings. I think it's a fool's errand. I do, to try to be some sort of hero, some sort of, like, I don't know, emotionless warrior that has to overcome the world on your own. I think our egos can get the best of us, and so, let it
I would
go.
also I would
Go
also
ahead.
say, it's important to surround yourself with the right kind of men, because you can find toxic groups of men who will validate you and hear you complain and um, become kind of like an echo chamber. You said at the beginning, Nate, that in the Diamond Dogs we kind of call each other out, and I often say we're trying to call each other forward, trying to call each other to become our best selves. And sometimes that does look like, calling out and pointing out our flaws in how we're thinking or how we're seeing things, our skewed perceptions. Um, but I love that the Diamond Dogs is not just an echo chamber to stroke each other's egos and validate and bash on our wives and say, yeah, you're right. She's a terrible person and you're great and you deserve better. Like, it doesn't really get like that. It's more like, trying to help us see our shadows and see the parts of us that that we don't see clearly and we're self-deceived about. I think that's important, who you hang out with.
Yes. So it's not just hanging out with men that's important. It's hanging out with the right men with the right intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
I agree. I'm glad you pointed that out. So last question I have for the both of you. I want to paint a picture of a before and after. If you could just briefly encapsulate who you were before you came across the idea of what a nice guy is, before you were ever introduced to a men's group, before you started doing this work, who were you then? And since starting to confront this side of yourself, these behaviors, this nice guy tendency that has kind of crept into your life, and since joining a men's group full of men who are calling you forward, who are lifting you up, calling you out to be the best man that you can be, how does that contrast with who you are now?
Um, I'll go first because Mike's much further developed and integrated than I am. But before, um, I was Mr. Covert Contract, Mr. Resentful, and miserable. Like, just uh, thinking that life had dealt me a really bad hand, believing that too with all of my heart. Now, I find myself every day feeling a lot of gratitude because I'm doing things because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm trying to extract anything out of anyone. I'm doing it because this is what I've decided is right for me to do. And whether I get something in return, that's just icing. I still feel good about what I've done, and I feel like a much more integrated person. I still feel with courage and finding a way to voice my needs, um, in like in a confident, calm way. And there's other tools out there, and I think we should have another. If if this resonates with people, do it again and talk about then how do we model this? How do we put this into action? What are the tactics are? But I'll just say, like, it's launched me on this journey of self discovery in a way that makes me just feel more complete and whole.
Well said.
I guess the words that come to my mind of who I used to be, weak, needy, um, were the first two words that came to my mind. I leaned on my wife for strength. Like I needed her to support me, which meant I couldn't really support her. I wasn't a strength for her. I wasn't in a place to do that. I was taking so much from her. And I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I can be more of her rock that she can lean on when she needs support. And I still feel like I can lean on her too, but it's not it's not as enmeshed, and we're both more stable and solid on our own, and then we can depend on each other more. I often think about it, like a bucket. Um, I used to come to her begging her to fill my bucket, and with validation, with approval, with admiration, with sex, with whatever. I needed her to fill my bucket, but my bucket had a hole in it, and everything just rushed right through out the bottom. So I was just constantly coming back to her, asking her to fill my bucket. And a big part of this journey has been, first of all, repairing my bucket, um, putting the bottom back into it, and then finding other ways to fill my bucket, not just her. And so it's like now my bucket is continually like full and overflowing sometimes. And then when she adds to it, like, well, that's great. That's just the icing on the cake. And instead of everything, like I explained earlier.
Beautifully said. I was going to answer the question myself, but I don't feel like I can do a better job than what you just said. So,
Well, can I
uh,
ask you a question?
yeah, you can ask me whatever you want. This is a conversation.
I mean, for the group, but I remember when I read this book, my wife saw it. She's like, it made her nervous and anxious because she wanted me to be a nice guy. She thought the opposite of a nice guy was a jerk. She thought
Yeah.
the goal of reading this book was for me to become a jerk. So how would you?
Nice guys believe that too, right? They think that either you're a nice guy or you're a total jerk. So it's a lot of people struggle with that line of thinking.
Yeah. So what's the opposite of a nice guy? Um, yeah, I guess that's my question.
I think the reason nice guys are dangerous is because they're so concerned with how the world sees them. Nice is what people see on the outside. And I think what the opposite of that is somebody who doesn't need the world's approval, doesn't need anybody else's approval, somebody who has integrity, courage, somebody who's whole and complete and not needing to um, escape the pain and sorrow and shame that they're feeling through whether it's compliments or porn or alcohol or being a workaholic and getting praised there. Like there's so many video games, so many places we escape to feel a sense of completeness or progress or competence. So I think the opposite of a nice guy is somebody who is solid from within. And I think the word nice could be replaced with like self-assured or kind or whole or full of integrity. Um, yeah, that to me is nice, is like the shadow of a version of what a man aspires to be at his best self.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like the artificial version of all those other descriptors you just said: integrity, courage, honesty, confidence. Like you can almost just kind of mask all of your
Yeah.
lack of all of those things by just being nice.
Nice is what you hide behind when you don't have those things.
Yeah, it's a good way
Yeah.
to put it.
Yeah. So it's not that by confronting your nice guy that you turn into somebody cruel and unkind. It's that you take off the mask, look at what's really there, and address it, and allow yourself to be seen without the mask anymore. Take some feedback, work on yourself, acknowledge your imperfections and your weaknesses. Really start self-reflecting, confronting the dragons that you've been avoiding in your soul, surrounding yourself with people who are going to build you up and encourage you, and honestly make your life mean something. You make your relationship mean something. You start, as I've gone on this journey, I've started to find a lot more purpose. Life has become more exciting for me. I find that my connection with the people that I love has gotten deeper. And it's a scarier way to live because you're definitely taking more risks. You're risking being rejected, you're risking being fully seen, you're risking being told no, you're risking a lot, but I don't think you get reward without risk. So
Mhm.
the last thing I want to just
Yeah.
reiterate here is, Chris, will you read off your notes again of what a nice guy looks like?
Yeah, of course. Someone who's dishonest, they hide their mistakes, they avoid conflict. They're secretive because they're so driven to seek approval. They're manipulative. They have a hard time making their needs a priority and asking for what they want. They're controlling to try to keep the world smooth. They give to get. They have a lot of covert contracts. They're passive aggressive. They express their frustration in indirect, roundabout ways. They're full of rage, just a lifetime of frustration and resentment. Have often have a lot of addictions, porn, food, you name it. Difficulty setting boundaries, really hard time saying no. They're frequently isolated. They're attracted to people and situations that need fixing. They have problems in their intimate relationships, problems with sexuality, and they're relatively successful.
Got it. Okay. So here's my invitation
Yeah.
to whoever's listening to this. If this sounds like you, if this sounds like your life, if you're listening to that list of characteristics and you're going, oh crap, that sounds a lot like me. First of all, I hope that this conversation has shown you that there's hope, that there's something that you can do, that there's a brotherhood of men out there who have been where you are and who want to help you progress like they progressed, get out of this nice guy syndrome like they have gotten out of it. And I want to invite you to take action. And whatever that action looks like to you, it's going to be different. But I'm going to provide a bunch of resources down in the description of this episode, whether that's a link to the book or maybe a retreat or joining a men's group. I'll provide resources down below. And what I want you to do is just pick one thing and take action, because you're going to stay. Nice guy syndrome doesn't change alone when you're on your own. It's one of those things that, in order to break free from this really unhealthy, destructive cycle, you need the help and support of your brothers, of other men who have been in your shoes, who are in your shoes, who can show you the way, who can help you see your blind spots, who can call you out when your wife and anybody else in your life can't. And there's no better way, in my experience, to grow up and become the man that you want to be than by taking action and following through on one of those things. So that is my invitation to you. I'm grateful to the two of you guys for jumping on here and being vulnerable and sharing your experiences and your knowledge and wisdom from your own journey. If it resonates, if it hits a nerve, if you guys want to hear more diamond dog conversations about breaking out of our nice guy syndrome, how we've dealt with issues in our relationships, how we've tried to grow ourselves up, let us know. And I think we've got a lot of guys who would be willing to come back and continue the conversation. If you got something valuable out of today's conversation, I want you to do two things. First, I want you to click the little button down below to subscribe to this channel so you can get more helpful information that will help you strengthen your relationships down the road. And second, I want you to go down in the description of the video and check out some of the links that I left there so you can do something about nice guy syndrome to improve your situation. Your life won't change unless you take action. And right now is the best time to do that. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon with another new interview to help you strengthen your relationship.